I used to think my marriage was solid, stable, if not thrilling. My husband, Omar, is a dedicated man. Hardworking, responsible, always doing what needed to be done to keep our lives comfortable. His job at the logistics firm demanded long hours, and though I missed him, I never complained. I understood. At least, I told myself I did. Our home was quiet most days, just the soft ticking of the clock and the hum of appliances filling the silence. I spent my time managing the household, dabbling in freelance work, and trying to ignore the growing emptiness that clung to the walls like dust I couldn't quite sweep away. Then came Tariq, Omar's younger brother. He had just moved back to town after a messy breakup and needed a place to land. Omar, ever the dutiful brother, offered our guest room without hesitation. "He's family," Omar had said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "He won't be any trouble." First, he wasn't. Tariq was charming in a way that felt effortless. He'd always been the more outgoing sibling. Where Omar was stoic and reserved, Tariq was laughter, energy, and quick wit. He filled the silence of the house in ways I hadn't realized I craved. He'd help out with groceries, offer to cook dinner, and linger in the kitchen while I worked, swapping stories that made me laugh more than I had in weeks. Felt harmless, comforting even, a breath of fresh air in a life that had started to feel suffocating. Still, there were moments, small, almost imperceptible shifts in tone or glance. Like the time he told me, "You deserve more attention than Omar gives you." He'd said it with a grin, almost teasing, but his eyes had lingered a second too long. I brushed it off. I had to. It was probably nothing, just Tariq being Tariq. But something inside me stirred. A flicker of attention I didn't want to admit I enjoyed. I told myself it was just the novelty of someone noticing me, seeing me, not just as a wife holding the fort, but as a woman. Then Omar asked me to keep an eye on Tariq while he was away on a week-long business trip. "He's been a bit off since the breakup," Omar said, concern knitting his brow. "Just make sure he's okay, yeah?" I nodded, masking the unease rising in my chest. I didn't have the words for it yet, but I sensed a shift. Something about to unfold. Something I wasn't sure I was ready for. As Omar packed his suitcase that night, I stood in the doorway watching him, wondering how we got here. So distant, so distracted. I told myself everything was fine. In the wake of Omar's departure, the house grew quiet yet strangely charged, as if each corner held a secret waiting to be revealed. Tariq's presence, once merely a benign family guest, began to take on a more intricate hue with each passing day. Initially, his visits were sporadic and unassuming, but soon he arrived each morning with a gentle knock and a warm, lingering smile that seemed to say he cared more than he should. I found myself both comforted and unnerved by the subtle intensity in his gaze, a silent invitation to a conversation deeper than small talk. At first, I rationalized his extra attention as nothing more than kindness. He helped with minor repairs, prepared a fresh pot of coffee, and even shared stories that brightened the long hours of solitude. His laughter filled the empty rooms, momentarily dispelling the loneliness that had crept into my life. Yet beneath that congenial exterior, there was an undercurrent of something unspoken. Every compliment he offered and every lingering glance slowly eroded the boundaries I had carefully maintained. One dreary afternoon, when rain drummed softly on our windows, Tariq and I found ourselves alone in the living room. The soft light cast shadows that danced around us as he spoke with an earnestness that left little room for pretense. "You deserve to be cherished," he said quietly, his tone gentle yet charged with emotion. His words struck me like a spark in the darkness, a moment of warmth that both comforted and alarmed me. I felt a rush of validation, a reminder that I was seen and valued, even if only for a fleeting instant. In the days that followed, our interactions grew more intimate. A light touch on my arm as he passed by, a shared smile over an inside joke, and a look that lingered long after our conversation had ended. All these small gestures accumulated into an emotional closeness that I had not anticipated. Each encounter left me in a state of inner conflict. Excitement battled with guilt, as I tried to convince myself that these moments were merely harmless escapes from a monotonous reality. Yet, the intensity of my response betrayed me, hinting at a vulnerability I had long concealed. By the time the week had unfolded, it became painfully clear that nothing would ever be the same. The once innocuous exchanges had transformed into an undercurrent of desire and confusion. I stood at a precipice, torn between the security of a familiar life and the dangerous allure of uncharted emotions. As I watched the rain streak down the window, I knew that the path ahead would force me to confront the deepest parts of my heart, a confrontation that promised to redefine everything I once held dear. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt colder. Jake was gone. No sound, no note on the counter, no goodbye. Only a cup in the sink and the faint scent of sawdust lingering in the air. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, holding onto the edge of the counter, wondering what exactly I had done. Not just the act. Everything that led to it. I made coffee out of habit, but it tasted bitter. I sat at the table where we'd shared so many quiet moments, and for the first time, I hated the silence. My wedding ring felt heavier than usual, like a weight instead of a symbol. I slipped it off and placed it beside my cup, just to feel some distance from it. David texted around noon. Flight was delayed. Be home late. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound fake. He came home that night with the same distracted kiss on the cheek, same suitcase rolling behind him. He asked, "Everything okay while I was gone?" I said yeah. He didn't press. He never does. I studied his face while he changed clothes, trying to see him the way I used to. I couldn't. Not because of what I had done, but because of everything that came before it. The slow, steady erasure of who I used to be in this marriage. He crawled into bed beside me and fell asleep within minutes. I stared at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, and felt like a stranger in my own life. For the next few days, I went through motions. I folded laundry. I made dinner. I smiled when he talked about work. But every moment felt like I was pretending. I caught myself replaying Jake's words more than the night itself. You deserve to be noticed. That's what stuck. Not the kiss. Not the touch. Just the feeling of being visible for the first time in years. I didn't try to contact Jake. There was no point. It wasn't going to happen again. It wasn't love and it wasn't a fantasy. It was a moment of clarity that came dressed as a mistake. And maybe it was both. Some mornings I wake up and forget for a second. Then it rushes back, the guilt, the heat, the ache. I keep it buried. I've become very good at that. I never told David. I still haven't. I doubt I ever will. What would it fix? He'd either leave or worse, he'd stay and look at me with disappointment he never once showed for his own neglect. I've started writing again. Nothing fancy, just a journal I keep hidden in the back of the closet. It helps me understand the version of myself I became. The woman who broke her own rules not out of impulse, but from being ignored for too long. I read back what I wrote and sometimes feel sorry for her. Other times I feel proud she finally did something for herself, even if it came with a cost. David noticed I've been quieter, but he assumes it's work stress. He's even been slightly more attentive, holding my hand in public, complimenting dinner. I nod, I smile. But there's a wall now. Not because of the secret, but because I no longer look to him for connection. That need is gone. I sometimes wonder if he's ever had his own secrets. Maybe someone he met during a trip, a night when he didn't feel like calling home. But then I realize it doesn't matter. The distance between us was never about other people. It was about the absence of presence, of effort, of care. The worst part of infidelity isn't the act. It's the silence that follows. The way it changes how you see yourself. The way it forces you to ask who you've become and whether there's a way back. For me, I don't think there is. But I'm not looking for redemption. I'm looking for truth. And sometimes truth comes through the wrong door. I stood in the garden this morning, trimming the lavender. Jake once said it was the prettiest part of the yard. I hadn't touched it since he left. As I snipped away dead stems, I realized something. He didn't save me. He didn't break me either. He just showed me what I was missing. When I went back inside, I slipped my wedding ring on again. Not as a symbol of love, just as a reminder of where I've been. And maybe a quiet promise to myself that I won't disappear again. I'm still married. But now I live with a version of myself I never knew existed. Not broken. Not ashamed. Just awake. And no one, not David, not Jake, can unknow that part of me now.